Also proud at our state being a state that is very well run. We do it right on a wide variety of metrics. And I kind of looked at this again more recently because I was invited to go up to campaign in New York for our governor candidate, Lee Zeldin, in New York. And so I went up there, and he's a great guy. He'll do a great job, and I think he's got a good shot. But I also just made the point, as governor of Florida, I and you as Florida citizens, these races in these other parts of the country actually affect us. For example, we have this Georgia governor's race where our Georgia governor is running, and I think he's going to win, but he's running against Stacey Abrams. And here's the truth. He's going to win, but if by some chance Stacey Abrams got elected governor of Georgia, it would absolutely spark refugees flowing from Georgia, coming to Florida, and moving to Florida. They would pick up and move. You would absolutely see that happen. No question about it. You see some of these other states where you have poor governance, people have enough. Florida is the place that everybody looks to first to be able to go. And so we've seen it in New York as well. They've chased out so many people through poor government and mismanagement. I mean, think about Florida. We have millions of more people than New York does now, and yet our budget is less than half the size of New York State budget. In fact, our budget's like the same size as New York City's budget. And we have way more people than New York City. But here's the thing. We have less than half the budget. But the New Yorkers that come here, what do they tell me? You have better roads in Florida, better services, better infrastructure. And we know we have better education, too. So where is all this money going that they're spending? They're taxing people. They're taxing people to smithereens. They're causing businesses to fold because of the excessive regulation and taxes, and the money is being frittered away. It is not making the quality of life in New York better, and it's a function of very, very bad management. And oh, by the way, our budget, we have no income tax, and we'll never have an income tax. We have the second lowest per capita tax burden at the state level in America. We have the second lowest debt per capita burden in America. New York has one of the highest in both. And out of a $102 billion budget in the last fiscal year that ended on July 1st, we had a $22 billion budget surplus, the largest in history. So we respect taxpayers. We want to guard your money well. We want to use it for things that matter, but not fritter it away. It's basic management. Another management, so we had Hurricane Ian hit Southwest Florida. A lot of people in this area were thinking it could hit Tampa Bay even 36 hours before landfall. That's what most people were predicting. These things are dynamic, and so it came, cut through across the whole state, obviously did the most damage in Southwest Florida. But, we had 42,000 linemen stationed in the state of Florida, ready for impact. And you had massive millions of people's power knocked out from coast to coast. I mean, from Southwest to Daytona Beach on the Atlantic coast, power outages. The linemen descend. They did the fastest restoration for a major hurricane in recorded history for power, and we were happy to see that. We had urban search and rescue team stage, Coast Guard, we were working with them, local law enforcement, Florida Fish and Wildlife officers, National Guard was activated, all this. As soon as the storm passed, rescue after rescue, thousands of rescue missions throughout the state of Florida, saved a lot of people, very, very well done. But you had a situation where in Southwest Florida, the storm knocked out a bridge to this place called Pine Island, and it also severed the Sanibel Causeway in 3 different places. And so those residents were being told it's going to be 6 months to a year before you're going to have regular access to these islands. And so they came to me. It wasn't a state bridge or state roads or any of that. They came to me and they said, you got to help us because the islands will die if it takes 6 months. And I'm like, I agree, I'll help. So we'll look what we can do. So we worked with the Florida Department of Transportation. I said, I don't want to see any red tape. I don't want to see any bureaucracy. I just want to see very concerted effort, and we want to see a restoration as quickly as possible. So we took over the project, assumed responsibility, and reopened Pine Island Bridge in 3 days. Now, I don't know about you, but if you think that in New York or some of these other states, they would have been able to restore the bridge in 3 days, then please talk to me after this event, because I got a bunch of oceanfront property in Arizona I would like to sell you. So we're proud of the management, but one of the things you see when you go up to a place like New York, and we sometimes take it for granted, is because in Florida, we're proudly a law and order state, and I'm proudly a law and order governor, and that's what you need. That's what you need. But they're in a situation where they've done a lot of really dumb things over the years. A lot of this is woke ideology put into criminal justice. They attacked law enforcement with the Floyd protests and Floyd riots, and they defunded a lot of police. They slashed budgets in New York City. You never saw me out there protesting against the police. I supported the police in the state of Florida. So they've done that. It's been disastrous. But then they've also enacted soft on crime policies like no bail, no cash bail. So you'll have someone commit a crime and they just let them out, and they commit more crimes before they even get prosecuted for the previous crime they committed. It's insane, and it's putting a lot of people at risk. They also have policies to release people early from prison who've not even served their sentence and are still dangers to community. So that's been a total disaster. Then you have prosecutors that get elected now. They get massive amounts of money from left-wing groups, including people like George Soros, to run the campaigns. And what happens is they get elected, usually in very left-wing jurisdictions like Manhattan, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and they say, we're going to reform the criminal justice system. Well, how do you do that? You're not a legislative body. You can't change the law as a prosecutor. So what they do is they just don't enforce the laws they don't like. If they think that you shouldn't be prosecuted for stealing $500 from a store, then they just say, we're not going to prosecute you unless you steal $1,000 from a store. That gives license to criminals to just basically run wild. People don't feel safe now in New York the way they used to 15 years ago. LA, I was talking to women out in LA, they take off all their jewelry just to be able to go shopping in broad daylight. In Chicago now, you could be on Michigan Avenue in the middle of the afternoon and you could get mugged, and that used to never happen. So all these left-wing policies are letting the inmates run the asylum in society. And that has devastating effects. And so New York is feeling that. Lee is talking a lot about it, which is very significant. But in Florida, we support law enforcement. What I did 2 years in a row, every sworn law enforcement in the entire state, every firefighter, EMT, we delivered $1,000 bonuses 2 consecutive years. We've seen how horribly some of these people are treated in New York, Seattle, all these other places who wear the uniform. So we instituted a recruitment program in Florida. You come and join up in a municipal, county, state law enforcement agency. You get a $5,000 recruiting bonus just to start. You got people wanting to flood down here. It's a big deal. We also we rejected defund police. And not only did we reject it, I work with the legislature. They passed law. I signed it. We have prohibited local governments from defunding police. If they do it, we'll put the money back in. We're not going to go down the road and put your safety at risk because you may have 3 yahoos on some city council pursuing an ideological agenda. We're not going to let that happen in Florida. We also reject soft on crime policies. We will never eliminate cash bail in the state of Florida as long as I'm governor. And we are going to make sure that criminals are held accountable for their conduct and that they serve their sentence like intended by law. We also had situations where, we don't want to see prosecutors ignore the law either. So we had a fella in Hillsborough County said there were laws he wasn't going to enforce. So I removed him from his post. And I think some of this stuff, it's sad because there's been a huge human toll to these policies that you've seen in these other jurisdictions. It has absolutely contributed to people fleeing these jurisdictions. And you talk to realtors in Florida and say, why are you coming? And yes, the taxes, but we've always had lower taxes. Yes, a lot with, COVID. They didn't want to be in the lockdown states, schools being open, important. But one of the number one things these people say, particularly the families, is public safety. They want to be in a place where they feel safe. And so that's really the foundation of everything. If you don't have law and order, then none of the other stuff matters. But I really think it's an example of how woke ideology is just distorting the things that's happening in our society. Another example of this is what's been going on at the southern border. I mean, who allows millions and millions of people from over 100 different countries to just pour into your country illegally? It's harder to get into the country as a U.S. citizen than it is as an illegal alien now. It's ridiculous. They're not testing them. They're not making them show any paperwork. They'll make you do that until very recently. So you have that coming in. And yet, no one has gotten upset about that, our elites. They don't care about that. They're perfectly happy to see it. The empowerment of the drug cartels. They're making billions and billions of dollars now. They're moving so much fentanyl into the country that it's now the number one cause of death for Americans 18 to 45. And yet the elites don't care about the fentanyl ravaging our communities. They don't care about criminal aliens coming across the border. We had a sheriff's deputy right across the bay in Pinellas County killed by a twice deported illegal alien who came across Biden's open border about 6 or 7 months ago. And I didn't hear a lot of outrage from the elites about that. They only get upset when we have 50 of them show up to Martha's Vineyard. Then they get really upset. So, what they're doing is just ridiculous with the border, and you should close the border. But if you're going to have illegal immigration, then the sanctuary jurisdiction should have to deal with it. We're not a sanctuary state in Florida. And so that's why you've seen D.C., New York City, all this other stuff. But, Martha's Vineyard is very wealthy. They're very outspoken about being a sanctuary jurisdiction. At least they were very outspoken until recently. They have a social services office saying, we welcome everybody to come to Martha's Vineyard and all this. And yet, the border towns in Texas have thousands of people that will overrun those communities. And these are very poor communities down there. Martha's Vineyard, very wealthy, a lot of resources. What did they do at 50? Did they live up to their moniker of being a sanctuary jurisdiction? No. Declared a humanitarian crisis. Had the National Guard come out, and they deported them off their island the next day. That's what they did. Honestly, maybe we get the people to run Martha's Vineyard to go down and run the southern border and just send people back. But what that shows you is in our country, the elites that have so much power, they want to impose their vision and their policies on the rest of us, but they do not want to have to live under the consequences of those policies themselves. And that's one of the things that's wrong with this country right now. But I can tell you this, nobody was talking about this issue, and it's sad that, like, you don't mind all the millions of people, you don't mind the fentanyl deaths, you don't mind criminal aliens. There was 50 migrants that were found dead in some trailer down in South Texas a couple of months ago. You didn't hear the outrage. It really only when you pierce their little elite cocoon that they get mad. But this put this issue back on the front burner where it belongs. People are talking about it. People want to see action. And I do believe on Tuesday, if we all do our part, Republicans will win both the House and the U.S. Senate on Tuesday night. I believe that. So what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to show us that they're serious about changing what's going on in the border. They need to hold Biden accountable. They need to hold DHS accountable. Use the tools that they have under the Constitution to bring about a change in policy. We need Remain in Mexico reinstated. We need the border wall built. We need all these different things, and they need to fight for us on this border when they become the majority. So hopefully that'll happen. But you think about Biden, and I mean he came to Florida, and someone was like, are you upset that Biden's coming down to Florida? I'm like, no, this is a gift to me that he's coming down. I want every Florida voter to know and be reminded of the consequences of his policies. I also want every Florida voter to be reminded that Democrats in this state have been voting with him 100% of the time on all of this, and so they own it just like he does. But when you're in office, there's things that happen. I mean, we had to respond to the hurricane, just what you do. But there's I think a difference between having to deal with the crisis and then having your ineptitude create the crisis itself. And that's what Biden's doing. He created the border crisis. I mean, we had more work to do, but he created this. He's created the worst inflation in 40 years because they printed and borrowed and spent trillions and trillions of dollars when they were warned not to do it. He has made it more expensive for us to meet our energy needs because he's kneecapping domestic energy production and instead begging Maduro for oil, begging the Saudis for oil. Give me a break. So those are policies that are creating problems for our country. His crime policies are reflected in what you see in a lot of these states and localities as well. And we need things like energy independence in this country. It's very important to control your own destiny. So Biden, I think, is unique in the sense that clearly, not the most energetic guy got a lot of issues there. We understand that, but his policies are creating and exacerbating problems. And I just think that in this country, look, I've been battling him the whole time. I mean, I've been there since day one he got in, and we've been fighting on your behalf. But November 8th is really the first time that every American gets to go to the polls and just tell Joe Biden what you think of his policies. You can send a loud message on that. And I think he needs to hear that. And one of the things that frustrates me is, what do they do with inflation? They say, okay, we've got a solution for you. What is it? Well, we have a piece of legislation called the Inflation Reduction Act, which is insulting all of your intelligence because it's doing nothing to reduce inflation. What it is doing is it's creating 87,000 new IRS agents, which will be used to audit the middle class in this country. And I think to myself, 87,000 IRS agents, every member of Congress that voted for that should have to be audited by the IRS every single year. But you look at those 87,000 IRS agents, and you got to think, like, that is your solution to unleash the IRS on the American people? We should do 87,000 Border Patrol agents. That would maybe make a difference. So, Inflation Reduction Act, you have a chance, of course, to make your displeasure felt with Biden, but also by retiring Nancy Pelosi. I think once and for all, we thought we had done that in 2010 and she came back. I think this is it. I think this will be the swan song. But honestly, the fact that she's still there shows you in the United States of America, this country needs term limits for members of Congress. That would go a long way to fixing a lot of this. So you have that, you have those failures. You also have a situation in our country where you're seeing woke ideology get into the education system. And in the state of Florida, we've made it very clear, we've drawn a very clear line in the sand. Purpose of our schools and the school system is to educate kids, not to indoctrinate kids. That's not why we have schools. You know, I went to school right across the bay here in Dunedin. I don't remember any of the ideology in anything I ever did. When I did math class, we just did math. You know, when you do English, like we read and learned English. That's just what we did. Now you have a situation where a lot of ideological groups want to use the school system as a means to impose their agenda on our kids. And that is wrong. And in Florida, we believe in parents' rights. We believe that parents have a fundamental role in the upbringing and education of their kids. We've signed the Parents' Bill of Rights here. We signed a bill guaranteeing curriculum transparency for every parent. Parents should know what's being taught in their kids' school, what textbooks are being used. You know, we got opposition from that from certain people. Why would you not want the parent to know what is being taught? The only reason you would not want that is because you're worried that the parent will be an impediment to you wanting to use the schools to indoctrinate kids. That's the only reason to oppose curriculum transparency. So we've done that. We also understand they're trying to do other types of ideology. So we've drawn a line on the sand on that. We have banned critical race theory in our K through 12 schools in the state of Florida. We're not teaching kids to hate our country or to hate each other. We're going to teach kids that people should be treated based on the content of their character, not divvied up based on the color of their skin. And we want everybody to have a chance to succeed in our state and in our country. And part of that means we need to equip every student with knowledge about the founding principles of this country, American civics, the U.S. Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. We need to teach kids what it means to be an American. After all, there's been a lot of people since the founding of this country that have sacrificed an awful lot, including their lives, so that we could have a free society. We owe it to them to make sure that we're raising the next generation with a solid foundation and understanding how lucky they are to be U.S. citizens. And one of the things we're doing to support that effort is, and this is actually going to be tomorrow, November 7th. I signed the law. Every year on November 7th is going to be a day for the state of Florida to reflect upon, but for kids in school to learn about the victims of communist regimes throughout history. We're going to teach the truth about Marxism and Leninism. Over 100,000 dead at the hands of Marxists, 100 million dead at the hands of Marxist-Leninist regimes since the dawn of the 20th century. That is the truth about that type of a system. And so, yes, learn about ours and appreciate ours, but man, you appreciate it a lot more when you know what tyranny really looks like. So we're doing that here in Florida, and we're going to continue to be strong on that. We also need to ensure, and we are doing this in Florida, that material in the classroom, particularly for young kids, is age appropriate. There should not be things that are not appropriate for young people. And my wife and I, we're sensitive to this because we have a 5, a 4, and a 2-year-old at home. And you're raising kids. I think it's tougher to raise them now than when I was a kid. Not that it was ever easy, but there's so many different influences now that if parents just want kind of, one set of foundational values, there's a lot of different things that are competing with that now. And my wife does a great job. We have the best first lady in all 50 states. She does a fantastic job as a mother, as a wife, and serving Floridians. She, before the Hurricane Ian hit, she had already established a fund, the Florida Disaster Fund, to help storm victims when the storm ultimately hit. And she's now raised over $54 million to help storm victims. Very, very impressive. So we as parents just believe that Florida families should be able to send their kid to like elementary school without having some agenda jammed down their kid's throat. They should be taught to read, to write, add, subtract, teach the basic academic subjects, but it's inappropriate to be injecting concepts like sexuality in first grade. It's inappropriate to be injecting concepts like gender ideology in third grade, where you tell someone that their gender is a choice or that they may have been born in the wrong body. That is wrong. That is happening in other parts of this country. It is happening. And so we've said no, that's not what we want. Now, when the legislature was doing this bill, the left started attacking. They went ballistic over this. You had the media was frothing at the mouth. They were creating false narratives, demagoguing the bill. But, at the end of the day, the left was smart enough to know you don't win at the ballot box taking the position that elementary school should have this in there. People just don't believe in that. They don't think it's appropriate. And I think they understood that. So their kind of strategy was, well, let's see if we can enlist some woke corporations into defeating the legislation. And the idea is if you got some of them on, they could apply pressure. Maybe it filters in the legislature, or maybe somebody like me as governor would actually cave to this. So they went and they got the granddaddy of them all in the state of Florida, Disney, to oppose the bill aggressively. And people were saying at the time, if Disney does this, the bill's probably going to die. Why? Because since the 1960s in the state of Florida, anything Disney has wanted, it has gotten. It basically has run things, and they pretty much do what they want, and have gotten what they want. Until now. Our responsibilities are not to delegate leadership to a company based in California. No, our responsibility is to stand up for the best interests of Floridians, the best interests of Florida children, and the best interests of Florida families. And so, no, those tactics do not work on me. I am happy to stand against major interests to do what's right for the people I represent. And that's exactly what we did when we signed the bill into law. And I thought it was over then, but they came back and were like, we're going to work to repeal this bill. We're going to work to repeal parents' rights. And I'm thinking to myself, you may have a right to do that as a company. I don't think it's good business to do that, but you may have a right to do it. But you don't also have a right to do that and then also expect special treatment or subsidy from the state that you're going against their policy on. So we looked at this. We said, Disney, since the 60s, they've had their own government that they control in Central Florida. They're exempt from laws that other competitors have to follow, and they get major tax breaks in the state of Florida because of this special arrangement. So we said, we think sexualizing young kids is wrong. You are going down the road of supporting that. That's fine, not right, but you have the right to do it. But we are not going to put you on the pedestal in the state of Florida if that's the direction you're going. So we work with the legislature, pass legislation, and because we did, Disney's no longer going to have its own government it controls in the state of Florida. It's going to live under the same laws as everybody else and will finally pay its fair share of taxes in the state of Florida. But you think about it and you're like, how is this even becoming an issue? And it is just an outgrowth of this woke mind virus. I mean, we saw it in 2021 when I signed legislation protecting women's athletics in Florida. And I was happy to do it because they deserve to have an even playing field and they deserve fair competition. But you have situations now where you'll have someone compete on the men's swim team for 3 seasons, switch to the women's team, and then win the college national championship in the women's. I mean, give me a break. And you have those other women swimmers. They were working hard. The second place, quote, was from Florida. She should have gotten a national championship. Maybe the woman that got cut from the final round would have been able to compete in the finals. So you're denying opportunity for girls and for women athletes. And so in Florida, we made very clear we want to have opportunities for girls and women athletes. We want them to be able to compete with integrity and with honesty, and doing that so they can realize their dreams. We actually faced blowback from some of the woke companies on that too. They even had the NCAA saying, well, we may not do events. We're not going to hold events in states that protect women's sports. And so I see all this stuff, and I'm like, you know what? Go ahead and make my day on that. I'm protecting women's sports. I don't care. And of course, did they refuse to do events ultimately in Florida? Of course not. I mean, we stood strong. So you see that, and that's not a conversation we would have even having probably 5 years ago. And then now, and this is sad that's going on, you have physicians that are increasingly, for minors, doing things like giving puberty blockers and performing sex change operations on minors. Now, corporate media outlets will say that all of that stuff is, quote, gender-affirming care, but that's a euphemism. They're trying to change somebody's gender. They're trying to take, they'll have a young girl that will do like a double mastectomy. You'll have a young boy, and they will do things very, very invasive. And so that is not based on medical science. That is an example of ideology overtaking the practice of medicine. Obviously, some people are making money off of it, too, as we know. So it's a problem. And, there were countries in Europe that started to experiment with this, and they said, nope, this is not right. So they've stopped. And the thing is, teenagers go through a lot. There's times where things are, and over 80% of the dysphoria amongst teenagers resolves itself by the time they become older. So why are you mutilating their body parts? And here's the thing. Florida's taken a stand on this. We have adults who are supporting what we're doing, who went through these procedures when they were minors, and it has harmed them. They regret it. They wish they could have their normal body back. And so this is something that we do not want to see in the state of Florida. So we work with Florida Board of Medicine so that now going forward, a physician that prescribes puberty blockers or does these sex change procedures on minors will lose his medical license. Sad that we're even having to do this, but it shows you the extent to which woke ideology has captured a lot of different places in our society. So in Florida, we are very strong on this. We will not stop being strong on this. We have and we will continue to fight the woke in corporations. We have and we will continue to fight the woke in education. And yes, we have and will continue to fight the woke in things like medicine. We will never, ever surrender to the woke mob in the state of Florida. Our state is where woke goes to die. So I think we got great opportunities on Tuesday. If you are an Election Day voter, I just want to be very clear. You have no excuse. If something happens, if your golf cart gets a flat tire, I don't want to hear that. Come hell or high water, you are going to be casting your vote on Tuesday, November 8th. But the opportunities are great for us. You have the opportunity to keep our Republican Senator Rubio in office in the U.S. Senate. We have an opportunity to add to the U.S. House of Representatives from Florida. We currently have 16 Republicans. We could have, after election night, at least 20 Republicans going to Washington. 4-seat pickup. That's possible. And likely, maybe. We also have the opportunity to win supermajorities in the Florida House and the Florida Senate, the legislature that I work with. And I think we have Mike Beltran is here, is in the House. We got any other legislators? Oh, we got Jim Boyd is here. Good deal. I'm going to be the president of the Florida Senate in a few years. So we have great opportunities. And then we've already made big gains in the August elections with school board races. We supported a lot of school board candidates, big positive changes there. We got a couple more on the ballot that we can do there. And of course, you have an opportunity to giddy up again for your governor for another term. And so we hope you'll do that. Are you ready to storm the polls on Tuesday? Are you going to stand with me on Tuesday? Are you ready to keep Florida free? Thank you so much. God bless you all. So good to see you.